Still ahead, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is one of the most important speeches in American history. Do you know how Central New York helped to shape it? We'll tell you when our special edition of Bridge Street continues.
Welcome back. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address lasted just over 2 minutes, but it was so finely crafted, it continues to reverberate today.
And as Tim Fox tells us, there is research showing that the president had some help preparing his address from one of Central New York's most notable figures of the time.
Auburn's William Seward was Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of State at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. His home here in Auburn, the Seward House Museum, stands as a tribute to his life and his career. Andy Roblee is the facilities manager here at the Seward House. Andy, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Talk a little bit about William Seward and his place in history.
Mr. Seward was a lifelong politician. He served in the New York State Senate. He was a 2-term governor of New York. He was a 2-term United States Senator. This is all before he became Secretary of State. So he had a long-established political career even before Lincoln was elected.
And he was a real political foe of Lincoln's until he came into the administration.
They were rivals for the nomination of 1860 for the Republican Party. I wouldn't characterize them as enemies, but Seward was expected to win the nomination. He, as I said, was long established in politics. Lincoln kind of came from behind as the safer candidate in terms of slavery. But shortly thereafter, Seward campaigned for Lincoln in earnest and then, of course, became Secretary of State.
And a very key advisor to the president.
Yes, they worked very closely. They became intimate friends to the chagrin of many of the other cabinet members, but they became very close.
He was in Washington on July 1st to the 3rd when the battle took place at Gettysburg. He was there for the Gettysburg Address in November when the president went and viewed the battlefield, and you could still tell that there had been quite a battle there.
That's right. They toured the battlefield the day before the address, and the records talk about the battlefield still being strewn with the instruments of war. You could actually see remains of Confederate troops that were buried in shallow graves. Of course, a few months had gone by at this point, so it was probably pretty gruesome.
And the Gettysburg Address is one of the most famous speeches in the history of the world, and it's pretty apparent that Mr. Seward played a role in that.
Lincoln and Seward did work very closely, revising Lincoln's speeches, in particular his second inaugural address. We do know that Lincoln, about 11 p.m. before the day of the address, November the 19th, he went to Seward's house where he was staying in Gettysburg and visited with him for several hours. We don't know exactly what they did, but apparently he had a speech in hand, so most likely they were going over the speech and revising it.
Andy, you have thousands of visitors here at the Seward House every year. Talk a little bit about what people find here and how they can take themselves back 150 years.
We have probably the best collection of any historic home in the United States. Everything in this house was original, was owned by the family, was passed down through the generations. We've been a museum for over 60 years. You will find treasures from all around the world and things of very important historical significance to New York State and the United States here.
So talk a little bit about some of the gems in this collection.
We have, of course, extensive libraries. We have over 8,000 books in the house, more than we could ever display. Many of them have little markings in the margins by Seward himself. We have, of course, the day-to-day implements of life from back then. We have calling cards from ex-presidents, military leaders. We have a diplomatic gallery on our second floor, which is every available inch of wall space is covered by these pictures of leaders from all around the world. Many of them have signatures from those people, little notes written to Seward. It's very impressive when you walk up those stairs and see that.
Andy Roblee of the Seward House, thank you very much. The Seward House is open 10 to 5, Tuesdays through Saturdays year-round, and on Sundays during the summer from 1 to 5.
And Andy Roblee is one of the historians speaking in a special series of Gettysburg lectures each month this summer at the Seward House. You'll find the complete schedule at sewardhouse.org.